darkmyths.org and Neapolis Media Group proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast, featuring your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Stay tuned. Be right there.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is episode 157 of the Lone Gunman Podcast, and I'm your host, Rob Clark. And today, a special returning guest, my longtime friends and friends of the show here, Mr. Bart Kamp joins me. He is the proprietor of prayer-man.com, premier member of Dealey Plaza UK and the ROKC Forum. Everyone, welcome Bart back to the show. How's it going, man?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me once again.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear your British voice again. It's been a while. It's been too long, actually.
I know.
So
I know.
I'm happy to have you back on the show.
Glad to be back.
It's good to hear you on ST show. I took a little break, and I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad you're back on the show. Yeah. Now, Bart, you've been a very, very busy man. So why don't you let everybody know what you've been up to?
Quite a lot. Yes, I was on St. Patrick's show. That was good fun. That's summer last year, I think. Let's see, from there on. Okay, so basically, I've been working on this paper called Anatomy of Marina Oswald's Interrogations. And I started with that paper originally a few months after I released the anatomy of the second floor lunchroom encounter paper that when you and I talked about a couple of times, and that was December 2016, and then in September 2017 I released the first version of that, and a month later I decided to put a lot more work in it because I thought it was really cluttered and incoherent in certain bits because I'd been in the hospital for almost 90 days over the summer of 2017, and they pumped me full of morphine. And in a way, it's very nice to deal with the pain, but at the other end, it's like you're not very clear. You're not very clear-headed. So
going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, but yet at the same time, the only thing I was doing at that time while in hospital was tap out this paper and type out this paper, and then I just released it. And yeah, like I said, a month later, I was like, my God, this is rubbish. This needs to be doing. And I started working on that. And then in 2018, I did a 2-hour presentation at the Dealey Plaza UK Canterbury seminar in the end of April. And I said, well, this is going to be a loose talk, and in a few months' time, I'm going to release this paper, this follow-up. And just about the time when I was going to release it, it had grown from 308 pages to 450 pages. And I thought, my God, it made it even more cluttered than before. And I then had the brilliant, between quotation marks, idea of changing the whole approach to it, because what I'd done originally in the first paper was I'd had all these chapters of, say, like Wolf Fritz, James Brookhouse, Thomas Kelly, and so forth, and that wasn't really the right way to approach it, and I also thought it didn't have the same quality as the first paper I did on the second floor lunchroom encounter. So I said, okay, you know what? Maybe we need to change it, but I didn't know how. And then at some point I had a light bulb moment, which was in late July last year. It actually started with a video that I found of Oswald in the corridor. And it was actually a moment that was captured by a different cameraman as well. And the beauty of that whole part, that segment, was that one camera was positioned in front of the door of room 317, which is the office of Will Fritz, the robbery and homicide. And the other camera was on the other end of the corridor, close to the door that leads to the jail elevator, which is only about maybe 20 to 25 feet down from robbery and homicide. But the audio was in such a way that when Oswald came out the door, he started talking, and you couldn't see it with one camera, but the other camera captured it. Yet at the time that he was closer to the jail elevator door entrance, the other camera couldn't see it, whereas the other one did. And at the same time, then I managed to put a time on that. I knew it was happening around 7:15 in the evening of the 22nd. And then there's a very famous video segment of Oswald saying that he's a patsy, and that was taken at 20 to 8. Now, in between that, he went downstairs for a lineup, and so all of a sudden I went, well, you know what you should do? You should try and put this in a timeline instead of what the chapters that you've got on each person. So I had to basically chop everything up, just toss it in the air, and then start basically cutting and pasting. And that basically meant that I managed to cut out about 120 pages of material. And on top of that, I spent almost a year doing that, not only because I had to go back in the hospital for a short while, but also because I got really heavily involved with Malcolm Blunt. Because what happened is, about just over a year ago, he knew that I was working on a new Dealey Plaza UK website, and he said to me, "You do know that I've got my archive, but I've also got Harry Livingston's archive." Now, for those that listen and don't know who Harry Livingston was, Harry Livingston did a lot of research on the autopsy, the medical aspect of the Kennedy assassination and such. He wasn't the most easygoing person to deal with. I've never met him, but I've read enough. And basically, Malcolm took his archive back, a large part of his archive back from the States to England, and so he had about 32 boxes that were filled with files, and these boxes are, let's see, about 2.5 feet long, about a foot high and a foot wide. So they hold a lot of files, and there's 32 boxes of them. And besides that, he had a lot of videotapes. I'd say about, I don't know, 150 to 200 VHS tapes, and on top of that, all audio recordings as well. So he had a lot of cassette tapes. So I started digitizing all that, and I started doing all that about October last year. And in stages, I would travel by bus and bring back a couple of huge sacks or suitcases full of stuff, and just went through it. And as soon as I had it done, I would come back. And then it even got worse, because in February of this year, one night, Malcolm would quit at 5 o'clock, and I would basically go on with it, because all this stuff was stored in a property that Malcolm owned, but he put it on the market. It was an investment property, and it was right in the middle of a really quaint little town called Tedbury, which is very nice. It's very nice Britain. Those people that like Downtown Abbey and all that, is that kind of vibe to it. And,
is that the place where the chocolate eggs come from?
No, but there come a lot of files, a lot of Blunt files come from there. So one night I was basically just going through stuff, and I was kind of bored with going through the Livingston files, because although I found some really, really good stuff for me and for others, a lot of stuff for others, it wasn't really the stuff that I was after. And then Malcolm puts folders everywhere. So even though I was in the front of the property, he was in the back, and it was freezing. There was no heating. So the trick was to keep busy. So that's what I was doing. And so at some point I sat on the sofa in his area, and I found all these files, and I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And I found Will Fritz's HSCA interview. And, I find all these bits where I never knew this existed, and so I was like, I was in hog heaven when it came to documents. And all of a sudden, so the next morning, I spoke to him. We were staying in a little bed and breakfast about a stone throw away from it. And I mean, literally, a stone throw away from that property. And I said to him, I've been naughty. I went through your files. I said, but I've looked a lot of stuff up, and it's like, it's amazing. And he went, well, that's basically the stuff I did, that I researched for John Armstrong when I was working together with him from the mid to the late 90s. And I said, well, there's stuff in there that I've never seen or heard about. And that doubled my workload. So besides the Livingston files, all of a sudden I started putting my fingers into that pie as well. And there was a ton of information. And that kept on delaying the release of the interrogations paper because there was a lot of more stuff that I could add onto it, and also that I knew no one else had put their hands on so far. This is the thing with Malcolm Blunt. He's a document god, and I don't know anyone else that has spent so much time at the National Archives, and not just the ones in Washington, but he's been in Dallas, in Florida, you name it, in Tennessee. He's been all over the states basically. Whenever he basically gets on the plane.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, Bart.
Yeah.
In talking to Malcolm, and I know he spent a lot of time at the archives, and I know it's something you've been interested in, and something I've been interested in, and something that we just can't find. Did you ever ask Malcolm if he's ever came across Buell Fraser's lie detector test results?
No, I did. I found a lead at the archives about it, and I emailed them, and I paid for the scans, and they sent me a PDF file. This is about, 18 months ago. And all you have is basically that the police are keeping stum, and that the feds are trying to look for it, and there's just a bunch of reports going backwards and forwards about where are the files. Well, the police should have them, and the police go, I thought we sent everything to you, to the FBI, etc., etc. So everyone is basically passing the bucket around, and this is, by the way, the fact that you bring this up is interesting. The book by George O'Toole. The title is escaping me right now.
The Assassination Tapes.
Yes, that's it. But basically, he interviewed some of these guys that were supposedly involved with the polygraph test of Buell Fraser. And even these guys are like passing the buck and just denying that they were involved or they weren't in the room. Oh, I got this file that says you were in the room, blah, blah, blah. No, I don't know. I wasn't there, blah, 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 etc., etc. There's one or two chapters that is just devoted to that, and it's just probably one of the biggest missing pieces of evidence from the Dallas police.
So you think that's something that Malcolm never did come across either?
No, but I did hit the jackpot when I was there in February, because I went through a folder. And the folder was called Hosty Files, and it had about 150, 200 pages of paper, and the Xeroxes weren't of that great quality. And in that document, I found a document that is related to the interrogation, and the very first interrogation. You see, Jim Hosty was only present during the very first interrogation. After that, he got pulled off, and James Bookhouse, who was the Dallas liaison between the Dallas police and the feds, he basically continued to be present during the rest of the interrogation. Whereas actually Hosty was the guy who had the file on Oswald. He knew about Oswald.
Right.
So that by itself isn't that strange that he got pulled off, because Hosty couldn't keep his mouth shut, and he talked too much, and he was actually pretty much scapegoated by everyone. And when you read his book, he basically does his best to make everyone else look bad, but I've got read reports from Forrest Soros, for instance, who was one of the lead guys of the Secret Service at that time. And he basically said as well, like, Hosty was screwed up basically a lot. And it starts actually with when Oswald's brought in, and Hosty arrives around roughly 45 minutes later to an hour later after Oswald's been brought in. And he speaks to Jack Revel in the basement and said that, that Oswald was communist, but also that and this is the bit where they disagree on that. He apparently had said that Oswald was capable of doing such an act as killing the president as such. Now the funny thing is that there was no love lost between the police force and the FBI. So when Revel told Pat Ganaway, who was the head of the criminal intelligence division, he was a captain, Revel was a lieutenant, then Ganaway said to Revel, make a report. And he basically made a report about that particular conversation as such. That report, of course, Chief Curry, Jesse Curry, saw the chief of the Dallas Police, and he started talking about this in front of the cameras at the Dallas Police Department. They're on the third floor while he was being interviewed as such.
Right, but this is more like just hallway chatter on, as they're bringing Oswald into the police.
Yeah, it actually happened in the basement, in the parking garage. That's where it happened before they went up in the elevator going upstairs. And that basically, but the second that Curry started to blub about this, that basically meant that Hoover heard about it, and the fact that they basically said, like, the FBI is aware of Oswald, so they knew about him like beforehand, before this all happened, and they'd done nothing about it. So it made them look like fools, and that, of course, they got a very strong reaction from Hoover. So,
they don't like looking like fools.
No, because while Curry was in power, while Curry was police in chief, the FBI would not cooperate with the Dallas Police on anything. They would be invited to the academy, and they would be invited to, have people come around and educate them on, training and so forth. And all that got killed off until Curry left. After Curry left, it was just resumed as normal. But going back to Malcolm's files, in that file, in those papers, I found a really particular document because Hosty had said that he hadn't taken any notes. Oh, he had taken notes, but he destroyed those notes because it is FBI procedure to take notes and then basically type up a report. And once you have a typed up report, they would destroy the handwritten notes. Now, there is one sheet of paper which is basically written on the back of Dallas Police affidavit paper. And you can see that in that particular copy as such. And this is the strongest evidence that Oswald, first of all, got a code for his lunch, but even more important, that Oswald went outside to watch the P parade, the P, of course, standing for presidential. And that, of course, links to Prayer Man as Oswald being outside. Basically, this is the strongest evidence, even better than I'd say that he was saying that he was outside with Bill Shelley in front of the building.
Yeah, I mean, this is like bombshell type stuff.
Yeah. This is a really strong thing. I think the funny thing is, and now I'm speculating because Hosty didn't even use that particular sheet for his book, and I think he just put it in there because he got quite a sharp. He was sent to Kansas City, and actually he admitted later on that he loved it, but he just made it known to everybody that it was a demotion and so forth. But apparently, in an interview with William Law, he said like, no, I had no regrets about Kansas City, being in Kansas City at all, because he thought it was great, but he just did not want to give them the impression that he had an excellent time over there. So going back to Malcolm's archive, I spent
real quick, Bart, on that Hosty interrogation handwritten thing.
Yeah.
I was talking to Doug about this on our Quick Hits show.
Right.
I brought it up just because it was important enough to bring up and get out there for as many people to hear about as possible. But when you read through that, that entire handwritten document, everything that Oswald is telling them is verifiably true.
Yeah.
When he tells them about, he has a Russian wife. He spent time in Russia. He was in the Marines. You can go down through the thing, and he gets to the part where, okay, to buy a Coke. Then I went to lunch, and I went outside to watch the parade. And this is really, aside from Fritz's notes, which were written down a few days later after Oswald was
they're not contemporary.
Right. I mean, Hosties are, you figure, okay, he grabbed one of those affidavit papers, turned it over, and started taking notes as Oswald is talking to him.
I wouldn't say so, because the thing is, there are notebook notes as well. There are, he must have had like one of these notebooks that are like long and thin. So say about like a large iPhone, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And then just with a flip cover, and he wrote about 2-3 pages. But that's the funny bit, is that you've got handwritten notes on those pages as such, but then you've got this affidavit piece of paper as well, where he basically wrote down quite a story. What is known, you see, here's the thing. The first interrogation of Oswald had 6 interrogations in total. The first interrogation is the most pivotal one, because in that one, his alibi is destroyed, literally is destroyed, by hiding, first of all, that statement by Hosty. Secondly, the Fritz notes. The Fritz notes were hidden for
they didn't see the light.
33, 34 years. So they didn't come out until 1996, late 1996, through an anonymous donor. And that's when they came out in the public. And that's when people found out about that he had said that he was outside in front of the success school depository with Bill Shelley.
Right. So in the first interrogation of Lee Harvey Oswald, he told Fritz and Hosty that he went outside to watch the parade. And I told Doug, I said, it's not, and he's not sold on the prayer man theory, but I told him, look, it's not out of the realm of possibility, okay, that Oswald could have walked out those doors and stood behind everybody unnoticed, because everybody's focused on the president, coming around the corner, and then all hell breaks loose in Dealey Plaza, and nobody's worried about him. But when Oswald sees all hell break loose and shots are being fired, maybe he just slinks on back into the depository.
I agree with you to an extent, in the sense that there may have been a few individuals who hadn't seen Oswald on those steps. But what's more important is that, and this is also related to the paper, and this is the beauty of when you've got it in a timeline setting, because then you sort of find out about the discoveries as such, like when did people bring this forward, when did that come out, and so forth. And you see, what people need to realize is that Oswald was brought in as a cop killer. And who wants to associate himself with a cop killer?
Hey, nobody.
Somebody who's been working, 4 to 5 weeks in a warehouse, wasn't Mr. Talkative, didn't have any friends or associates. I mean, okay, so what, Frazier, who brought him in the morning, or drove him in the morning. Other than that, he wasn't very talkative. So people will distance themselves. So when all those statements are taken from the people like Lovelady and Shelley and then Garcia and all the others, that all were there at the same time when Oswald was brought in. The second this is brought up, then they go, yeah, he killed a cop. And you're not going to say, like, oh, yeah, I was hanging out with him every day. Because here's the thing. The second they found out that Buell Frazier was bringing him into work, Frazier was picked up by Irving police. And he was put in jail by Irving police, or held there in custody. And then Gus Rose and Richard Stovall went over to Irving to collect him, bring him into Dallas police. interrogating, and at some point Wolf Fritz comes in with a statement that said that he was a co-conspirator with Oswald. And of course he says, I ain't gonna sign that. So Fritz raises his arm and basically like he was gonna hit him. And Fraser said, I don't know what you think you're doing, but some words to that effect, but we're gonna have a hell of a fight. And after which he took that statement and stormed out. And this is a thing you really gotta take into consideration as well. Not just is Oswald accused of being a cop killer. Oswald, the tactics of the Dallas police and such. I mean, think about it. A pre-written statement where it basically says that you're a co-conspirator in the assassination, just like that. Now, you don't expect a police officer, and especially a captain, not doing that. And this is another thing I want to bring up before I go back to the archival thing. Fritz had a clearance rate of 98% at that time. With the numbers that I've seen, that would average about clearing 2 murders a week. Now, I don't know about you, but 98%, I'm thinking
that's awful high.
Some despot in North Korea or Belarus or Zimbabwe, where you know the elections are rigged, or the paper or the numbers are rigged. Yet here we have somebody in Texas apparently clearing 98% of all murders. And then when you think about that, why aren't the tactics of Will Fritz copied by every police force in the world? Because there would be virtually no crime, or better said, practically every crime would be solved as such. And we know that's not true because the average figures now are about, I think, are dangling around 50% as such.
Right.
So you're looking at the methodology of what Will Fritz would do to make people appear guilty or have them confess to a crime that they hadn't committed in the first place as such. And there are stories of that. And we also know that when Henry Wade was the DA, that he started to save all the material related to all murder cases. Now, this is after, I think, from the 70s until the 90s, roughly around that time. Don't hold me to it, but it's definitely after the assassination and such. And he kept it all in a warehouse. And based on DNA testing, sampling, and so forth, they managed to exonerate quite a few people as such.
Right.
It also pointed that there's this book by, what's his name, Gray, Edward Gray, probably, and this was about Henry Wade. This is a book on Henry Wade. And he said in that book that the miscarriages of justice in Dallas were 10 times the nation's average. So,
wow.
So, and you need to, these are all items and points you need to take into consideration from a social standing point of view about what's going on. Because I tell you what, that's what happened in the 70s and the 80s. Well, what do you think happened in the 60s? They weren't better then, it was worse. But it's only like luck for Will Fritz and for Henry Wade that they didn't preserve the evidence as what they did after the assassination.
Right.
Now, going back to Malcolm's archive, I basically ended up scanning. I've just finished everything, and I still need to organize a few bits here and there. But in the end, I think there will be 25,000, up to 25,000 pages of material to go through. There's
tell everybody where they can find it too.
Okay, well, you go to the dealeyplazauk.com. So Dealey Plaza UK is one word, and there is on the top of the menu it says research, and then go to collections, and then you see the collections of Harry Livingston, Skip Ryberg, and of course Malcolm Blunt and Ian Griggs, who passed away earlier this year. And all these 4 people, and 3 of them have subsections in the sense of documents, audio, and video. And I think I've uploaded 200 videos, a lot of these are conferences from the early 90s and TV programs from around that era. Then, of course, I'm going to release next year quite a chunk of medical audio recordings. These are all the telephone interviews that Harry Livingston did. Harry Livingston would just sit in the phone. You could just hear him breathe into the recorder, and he would call up 4 or 5 people in a row and just let the tape run. And he'd call anyone medical related. I'd say 90% of his tapes were either surgeons or people that worked either in Parkland and Bethesda. So I listened to a fair bit. I had it on one side of my headphones while I was doing other stuff on a desktop computer while I was working on my laptop. And overall, it's quite interesting. It's very funny how persuasive he was, because he'd always start a phone conversation. He goes, I only have a couple of questions and I only need a few minutes. And before you know it, he could talk to 20, 30 or 40, 50 minutes to these individuals and stuff. He's also, he found Diane.
Quick, Bart. Real quick, folks can find these videos and more from you uploaded onto YouTube on your channel, which is Lone Gunman. Two separate words, no relation to me, but yeah, Lone Gunman.
The videos, the videos are all there, and the audio is going to be released. There has already been quite a chunk that has been released, but the medical stuff is going to be released at some point next year, whenever I find the time for it, because it's quite a lot. The thing is also the videos. You don't have to look for it on YouTube, because if you go to the video section inside these collections, there are videos in these. There are videos already on that page. So if you watch one, you're already in the channel as it is and stuff. So there's a fair amount of stuff. I think audio we're looking at 350. In the end, there will be about 350 audio recordings and stuff. So it's quite a chunk. And I've got something else that I haven't laid my hands on yet. Well, I've got my hands on it, but I haven't been able to duplicate yet, digitize yet. And these are microfiche films, and they contain thousands and thousands of pages. And I haven't found a economic way yet to reproduce these yet. But I've got about 20 boxes filled with rolls. And these rolls, they have yards and yards of documents on them. It's just absolutely insane. So I'm looking for some kind of automated process where I can just have these images duplicated. The Oswald evidence is on there, some of them. Wow. Then I've got
maybe 5 years from now we'll get to
a few years time. Yeah, Wagoner Cars Archive I've got as well, which apparently is very hard to get hold of. I was told I could get only 5% of it, of a folder. They said we can scan in 5%, but Malcolm got a hold of his entire archive as such. So as a thank you, I will digitize the whole lot and release it for the masses to look at, and without any restrictions and such. So overall, that website is going to get more and more data added to it over the next few years, that's for sure. So that basically slowed me down, and then I finally managed, after going through Malcolm's stuff as well, I managed to get the paper released on end of July this year, and I was quite happy that I was done with it. At that point, it was clocking at 333 pages, and even now, since I've been working on bits, odds and sots, and again scanning bits, I found elements that are just like, oh, this is very important, this needs to be added on. I think I've now added another 10 pages, which will be released in the next version. I don't know when, but so, and the timeline gives you a really good view of, like I said earlier, what happened and how it was done, The Heidel name, for instance, doesn't show up until the 23rd. Oswald doesn't get a phone call for almost 24 hours. John Apt, I actually posted an article about that today because I finally managed to complete it. There's a video segment that I posted on my website, prayer-man.com. If you go to the diary part, it's the top post. And in that post is a video from Helmer Greenberg's collection. And there was a segment that I hadn't seen before, and I've been plowing through lots and lots of video of Oswald in the corridor and trying to find out when it was taken, and to put it in the timeline. And all of a sudden, there's this bit where Oswald comes out 3:17, and he's on his way to the jail elevator. He's escorted to the jail elevator, and he manages to stop for a few seconds, and he leans towards a microphone, and he speaks. But the problem is that the microphone doesn't record it. The camera sees it, but the microphone doesn't record it. So then later on, in that same video, about a minute later, you see somebody pushing a microphone forward. So you do sense that the camera, which was an ABC camera, was actually connected to the microphone, but the microphone was dead. It didn't work as such. And then that's Bob Clark, who was the journalist as such. And I found this video from 2003 at the 40th anniversary where he basically talked about that story. And that's the bit where actually Oswald is asking for John Apt. Now, Will Fritz said at some point that he offered him a lawyer and phone calls, etc., etc., and he didn't want it, and that he asked for Apt on Friday, but he didn't. You see, there are 3 reports by Bookhound, Thomas Kelly from the Secret Service, and Will Fritz, which all state that during the first interrogation, Saturday the 23rd, that Oswald requested to speak to John Apt. Now, who put that idea in his head? That's a good question, and there's probably no one's going to find out, because here's the thing: when Oswald was at the press conference, he clearly said he asked for someone to come forward. He didn't mention the name Apt. He asked actually anyone who would come forward to give him legal representation as such. And Oswald doesn't make a phone call till about 1:30 in the afternoon. That's his first phone call outside, to get legal representation and such.
Let me ask you a question, Bart.
Yeah.
When I know he wasn't allowed a phone call until then, but wasn't he visited by some ACLU people who may have tipped him off about Apt?
Right. The ACLU, under leadership of Greg Olds. Greg Olds was contacted by some people. I still don't know who. And they basically said, even though he's the murderer of the president or a police officer, why the hell doesn't this guy have legal representation and stuff, blah, blah, blah. And the ACLU, which is these days is a very big organization, but back then, I'm going to have to quote from a document, they were seen as almost like communist sympathizers at that time. And Greg Olds and a guy called Greer Raggio, they and 2 others, whose names I don't know, went to the Dallas police on Friday evening around 11 o'clock. Now, at first, Greg Olds is trying, if I remember correctly, tries to get hold of Earl Cabell, the mayor of Dallas. He doesn't get through. And then they go to the police station and they want to get hold of Will Fritz. They don't get hold of Will Fritz. The best one they get is, all these names, sometimes you just forget it. I'll mention it in a minute. They meet one of his representatives. They do not get to speak to Fritz at all, nor do they get to talk to Oswald, because they're basically being told that he doesn't want legal representation. So the UCLA boys, no, the ACLU boys, they are basically fobbed off. And two of them disappear, they go, and the other two are actually present when Oswald is at the press conference as such. Now the question is, at that point, after that, Greg Olds and the other guy, may have been Guerrero, left. Now I find that really hard to understand because if they didn't hear, it must have been that they didn't hear what was being said. Now that what do you call it? That press conference itself was quite chaotic. When you are listening to some of the tapes, they've all been cleaned up overall. But I heard the tape as well, which was much more realistic, and everyone is just talking through each other and so forth.
Right,
And,
telling each other to be quiet.
Exactly, it's a total mess. No one is disciplined for not even for a second, and it is also the shortest press conference known to mankind because
Right.
Oswald talks for about 30 odd seconds, and then Chief Curry says, "All right, that's it, let's go." Blah blah blah. It's Curry that basically breaks off the press conference as such.
Yeah, as soon as that question about him shooting the president comes up, then yeah, you've been charged, and
okay, and that's it. Yeah,
it's over.
That's it. Like it's over. Time to go. And that is what breaks it up real quick as well. But and you know what? In that period of time, he asked for legal representation. Really?
Right.
What times? And also, and this is another thing. He says, "I don't know what this is about." And this is another thing he says when H. Lewis Nichols comes around, and that's around at the top of my head 5 o'clock on Saturday the 23rd. And he said as well to H. Lewis Nichols, "I've been held incommunicado. I don't have any idea what is going on here." He is absolutely clueless to what what is happening. Another thing about the ACLU guys is that a person called Charles Webster, he talks to Greg Olds as well, and he was a lawyer, and he came from SMU, and he'd been around for quite some time. You see, there were lawyers around over there, but none of them would touch Oswald with a barge pole. And this is also in a way it's understandable because the guy is being painted as a communist defector, right?
Right.
He's a top cop killer, and now he's also being accused of killing the president. And by the way, the person that I didn't know the name of is Glenn King, Captain Glenn B. King. He was the guy who basically who was talking to Olds and his buddies, instead of Will Fritz speaking to them.
Gotcha.
So there is a guy called Harold McDermott as well, who called numerous times and then also sent a telegram. And he was a Chicago lawyer. And that telegram arrives around midday, and it's around the same time when Oswald had already said that he wanted out. But the thing is that Oswald never got to see that telegram. It was just shoved in a drawer in a desk, and that was that. It was. I've got to say that Oswald was railroaded on that first day. What happened, as such, that's a joke. The so-called evidence as well, it was practically non-existent. It was rubbish. The so-called palm print on the box. There was about 15 or 16 palm prints on that particular box that they said. The bag.
And he worked there. Come on.
Exactly. And the so-called fingerprints is an even bigger joke because the so-called nitrate test. Well, he had nitrate on his hands. He was working with books, boxes that ink printed on them and so forth. So,
and they'd already fingerprinted him at that point too.
Exactly. That's another thing. They fingerprinted him already by that time. And then also the nitrate test is that the nitrate test on his cheek, Pete Barnes, who was I think was sergeant, and he was part of that so-called fingerprint division, said that he'd never ever applied anything like that on a cheek to determine whether he had traces of nitrate on his cheek or such. He had never done that before in his whole entire career, and it was specifically on Will Fritz's request to do so. And Greg Parker said he thought it was a bluff, and I agree with that. Just trying to bluff him into something. But like I said, why is that first interrogation so pivotal? Well, they destroyed his alibi, and during that particular interrogation, there are quite a few instances where basically Oswald told him that he got his coke for his lunch, not after, not during. He got it for his lunch, which means that he got it before he sat down for lunch in Domino Room.
Well, that makes sense. Most people
exactly
have a beverage while they eat lunch, not after.
That's common sense. But for some reason, that doesn't exist there. And the other thing was, of course, that Oswald said that he was outside, and he said there were two instances. In two instances, that's been recorded by Fritz's handwritten notes, and also by James Hosty. Now, Hosty and Bookout, they write a joint report. And in that report, they write that down. They say he got a coke for his lunch. But this is where the fix comes in. Hosty is basically dismissed from the rest of all the interrogations. And Bookout continues. Now, Bookout writes another report. He writes another 3 reports. On every interrogation or every day he was there, he wrote a report. But he rewrites the report that was initially the joint report between Hosty and Bookout. So Bookout writes another report and he switches it around. And then all of a sudden, the second floor lunchroom. You see, the actual encounter wasn't publicized until around the time when Oswald asked for that, around 12 o'clock, between 10 to 12 o'clock, it came officially out in the news. Now, Marion Baker, who sat in the same room where Oswald was basically being interrogated, right next door, when he had his statement taken by Marvin Johnson, really crooked guy. He basically could have easily pointed him out as such and say, that's what happened. I saw him and I encountered him in the lunchroom and so forth. But none of that is brought up. You see, that would have been something that would feel like a clincher and basically say, okay, how about this? This police officer right next door says that he encountered you. He encountered you as such. And none of that was brought up. The actual second floor lunchroom encounter is created in the evening with Roy True and napkins of the FBI. That's
right, and probably, Marion Baker wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, and could have been easily confused as, as they're rushing in. Okay, there's a guy sitting in the domino room, or over to the right, or the storeroom, or whatever it was they called it. Does that guy work here? Yeah, he works here. He's okay. And they go up the stairs. But that's not the second floor,
No, and also, I doubt that Baker actually met him.
Right.
Baker only knew about him at the time that he was inside to be interrogated by Fritz.
Right, but even if they did run into him, it was more likely on the first floor and not the second.
Yeah, definitely. But you see, it's probably the front door.
Right.
I think it's definitely the front door. Because you know why? Because of the so-called rebel list. The rebel list is a list of people that were inside and accounted for, and when they were leaving, they have to leave their name, their address, and their phone number.
Right.
What's really funny about that list is that Oswald is number one on that list with his
Yeah.
Elspeth address. We also know that Oswald is the first one to leave that building. Um, how do we know that? Well, A, the list. B, well, people say, well, he left at 2.5 minutes. We know that's rubbish because this is where Roger Craig comes in. Now, Roger Craig has been discredited for a lot of things. But I'll tell you what, I believe Roger Craig when it comes to the bit about Oswald leaving the Texas School Authority. And also when it comes to the fact that he called Fritz, and Fritz said, come on over. And he basically walked into that office and confronted Oswald. And you know why I believe him? Because the next day in the Dallas Times Herald, the whole story is printed on the front page. This isn't some crap that's made up days after the event. This is stuff that he relayed on that very first day and was picked up by a journalist. I don't know the name who did it, but his significant portion on that front page, that particular article is in my paper, where he basically relays A, that he saw Oswald leave, run towards his car, Nashville and blood, and B, that he confronted him inside the office. And Fritz does his best to completely disown Roger Craig.
Yeah.
And during his warning commission testimony, it's an utter joke. I mean, this is somebody from the sheriff office, and
Well, didn't he go visit Bill Decker?
yeah, that's
And nobody knows what the hell they talked about.
yeah. Fritz, after Fritz left the Texas School Board, this is one of the enigmas where I just say, oh, I wish I was a fly on the wall on this one.
Yeah.
Fritz leaves with Elmer Boyd, who's still alive, and Richard Sims to go to Decker. And apparently Sims and Boyd say, well, we stayed outside. Yeah, like my boot. While Decker and Fritz have a little powwow together. Now, that's something that had to be said personal because it couldn't be done over the phone. So there you go. So the question is like, what was actually said over there? Richard Sims, by the way, is the most forgetful person you can think of. I'll tell you what, anyone of the listeners is interested in this stuff, just Google Richard Sims Warren Commission testimony. And you just try and read and keep a straight face by the amount of times he says, I don't recall or I don't know. It is unbelievable. I'm flabbergasted about the fact that the guy is actually a cop, because why would anyone with, like a colander for a brain when it comes to memory? Yeah? Basically be allowed to be on the police force. So that by itself is unbelievable. So the first interrogation is one of the most important bits in this whole case, and where they systematically destroy his alibi as such, and and also the fact that the paperwork, this is another thing. It's just quite indicative of the foul play being done by the feds and by the Dallas police. It's just hiding. Those are the contemporary notes. They're not just typed up reports as such. No, they're the contemporary notes of that particular interrogation and stuff, and they've been hidden for years, for decades. So I was quite shocked when I found that. I said to Malcolm, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he goes, "I didn't even know it was in there." And
wow.
I know exactly what he's talking about, because the thing is, once you have hundreds, thousands of pages of documentation going through your hands and you scan them, you glance on these things. You don't really fully read and absorb them anymore. It's too much information, because also it slows you down to such an extent where you just go, my God, I can't read all this stuff.
Yeah.
So then the Oswald is still in a confused state because after the interrogations, which are attended by Bookout, Fritz, and Hosty, and Elmer Boyd and Sims are sitting in there as well. There are 5 guys at that point sitting in there. 4 Sorrels comes in, and he's at the Secret Service. And Sorrels, of course, was at Parkland. Then he's at the Texas School Book Depository, and then from the Texas School Book Depository makes his way to the Dallas Police. And he gets to talk to Oswald for about 5 or 10 minutes, and Oswald's still confused because he says, like, aren't you my lawyer? Shouldn't you get me the lawyer? He goes, no, I'm at the Secret Service and so forth, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but shouldn't you get me a lawyer? And he goes, no, I shouldn't, and so forth. And at that point also he says, like, I don't want to talk to you because, I need an attorney and so forth. Now, before I continue, if you really want a good indicator of who Lee Oswald actually was, you should watch on YouTube the interview he did after his arrest in New Orleans. He did half an hour or 40 minutes or an hour's worth of an interview. And Oswald doesn't volunteer information unless he's asked. And he's intelligent, but he doesn't have any street sense. He's intelligent, but he's not clever. That's how I would describe Oswald. And he won't speak on his own, but he'll speak to you once you ask him a question, talk to you back. And that's how Oswald thought also doing those interrogations.
Right, and let's just say too, these questions, they're not really accusatory, as far as Oswald. They're just asking him basic questions like who he is, what's his background, stuff like this. It's not like, hey, do you own this rifle? Did you shoot the president? Did you kill the police officer?
They did ask him that, and every time he denied it. Whenever they said he murdered someone, they denied it. He denied shooting someone. He denied shooting anyone in the Texas Theater. Right. He denied shooting anyone on the elevator when they were going up to the 3rd floor. He denied shooting the president when he was interrogated by Fritz several times. And the tippet, he didn't even know what Oak Cliff was.
Yeah, you think if he was this big communist sympathizer and he was this big Castro supporter, that he would have, then he would have been like, hey, I did it for Castro. The government's been against Castro, and it's not fair, and he would have went off on his diatribe because he knew plenty about Cuba and Castro, as like from you said from his interview in New Orleans. He knew what was going on down there. He knew what the Russians were doing. He lived there. But yet he didn't, if he was proud of what he did, I believe he's the type of guy who would have bragged about it. But he denied it over and over and over again.
Yeah. And, that's the thing. He never changed that position. And he told anyone who asked him, and he denied it. And he denied it to the press. Even the Patsy sequence, when he comes out, they say, if you listen carefully, they say, did you shoot the president? And he goes, no. Everyone keeps asking me that. That's what he said.
Yeah. He didn't tell Robert or Marina or his mother that either.
No, exactly. He all told them, he said, forget about it. I have nothing to do with it. Now, there are indicators as well that that the rifle wasn't ordered by him and so forth was pretty damn clear. I mean, he never ordered that rifle. He could have bought any rifle in Dallas from anyone instead of that he gets a stupid traceable crap rifle. And where's the rest of the ammo? For instance, and all these things that John Armstrong actually did pretty good research on. Actually, the rifle is I find one of his top hits when it comes to the research on with it. The other thing is the gun, the pistol. once he's interviewed by Gus Rose. And Gus Rose is actually the guy who is known, him and Richard Stoffel, were known as the two guys who actually asked the question to Oswald before Rule 50. This by itself also, I write about this extensively in my paper, is quite an interesting chapter because, number one, Gus Rose says that Oswald told him that they tossed a gun at him. And there's a guy called George Applin who didn't mention anything about this in the 60s. Right. But when he was interviewed by Earl Goltz of Dallas Morning News, he thought that he saw one of the officers pull the gun out of his holster and toss it at him and made it look like it was also the gun. The other thing about Stovall and Gus Rose is that one of them said that he identified himself as Alec Heidel, whereas the other one said he was Lee Oswald. They contradict each other during the warrant commission testimony. The Heidel ID doesn't come into the picture until the Saturday, the 23rd. No one talks about Heidel at all, no one. Until late in the evening when they do some inquiries about it, apparently by phoning one of the detectives phoning military intelligence. This is another thing. A lot of Dallas police were connected to military intelligence as such. I'm not going through all the names, but there was quite a few such. Now, the thing is about that very first questioning session, that brings up Jim Lavelle as well. As you know, Jim Lavelle passed away a few months ago. And I think it was 99 or 98. And he claimed that he had talked to Oswald before Fritz did, and it's not true. As a matter of fact, I can say that it's a lie, and because he not only does his statement make absolutely no mention of any interrogation, he was way too busy on the ticket crime scene, and after that he was too busy with the lineups and stuff. And on top of that, he said it clearly during his warrant commission testimony that he didn't talk or interrogate Oswald at all until Sunday, the 24th, in the morning, which was the 7th and final interrogation before it got snuffed. Then there's another detective. Oh God, my brain is deserting me again. It's Joe Cody. Joe Cody, who sold who sold the gun that Oswald got snuffed out with to Jack Ruby.
Yeah.
So he sold it a year before, or something like that. He sold him the gun.
He sold Ruby the gun?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And the irony. He also claimed in an interview in the late 80s that he was part of questioning Oswald. Now, the recent document I found is a HSCA document, and this is an absolute beauty because this causes quite an issue. And this is after Oswald is actually brought in to the third floor of the Dallas Police. Now, I don't know if the listeners know about this, but basically Oswald has been frisked in the car when they drive back, and they get his wallet and his billfold out as such, and they find all these bits and bobs on him. And then apparently later on, just before the first lineup, Boyd and Sims frisk him again. And this is when they find the so-called bus ticket transfer and 5 bullets, live ammo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that sounds really awful when they frisked him in the car.
Right.
They didn't find those bullets in his pocket. I mean, the bus ticket, I can understand that. But bullets, that's a bit odd. But I'll do you one better. Charles Truman Walker is one of the guys who's part of the team that arrested him and brought him back. Now, quote from his HSCA statement. After Oswald's been dropped off, he says, being alone in there with him made me think he could still have a weapon, so I searched him good, but found nothing. So, let's get this straight. So he gets frisked in the car where they find a wallet. Then he's dropped off. Then Charles Truman Walker frisks him and finds nothing. And then he's being frisked again, which is a few hours after the arrest, because the first lineup wasn't until late afternoon. And they find 5 bullets, 5 live rounds, and a bus ticket in his pocket. So if I take those inconsistencies and I take Rose's statement that he said that the gun was tossed at him, and I take George Kaplan's statement as well, then I'm getting pretty close to believing that the gun was tossed at him. I tell you what, there's one wish of mine, and if anyone has ever done it, listening, has ever done it, and gone to Nara and look at the gun, inside the grip, yeah, so behind the trigger guard, inside the grip, there's supposed to be initials on it. I'd love to see those initials, because so far, no one has shown me a picture that shows those initials and stuff, and I want to see them. I really want to be 100% sure that that is the gun that has those initials on the inside and stuff. So we've got Stovall and Gus Rose, whose stories don't line up. We've got Lavelle telling fairy tales about initially interrogating him about regarding him. We've got Joe Cody, who talks another fairy tale or such. And then basically you get that first interrogation where, you know, all these weird things happen, but the bottom line is that Oswald's alibi is just systematically destroyed and such. Then he talks to Forrest Soros of the Secret Service, and then you get to the point where he goes for the first lineup and such. Now the lineups, that was something that I really didn't want to get involved in, because when I worked on the second floor luncheon encounter paper, I was only interested regarding Oswald's alibi, what he said where he was, and how the second floor luncheon encounter was actually fictitiously made up and stuff. And that's why I thought, okay, fine, that's it. But then all of a sudden I'm starting to do this paper on the interrogations, and then it gets to the point where it's like, well, if you do a timeline, then you've got to include the lineups.
Yep.
And for that, I've got to be thankful to people like Ian Griggs and Joe McBride and about 2 or 3 others. I think Bill Poulter was another one. And yeah, there's another 1 or 2 people. Name I can't recollect right now. And I started looking at all this stuff. And, you know, everybody knows that when you go through the lineup, I'm not going through every lineup and all the specifics, but, you know, generally speaking, is that when you do a lineup, you've got to have people from roughly equal height, skin color, dress, and so we know that in the beginning there were just police officers that were his co-lineup guys, and they were, you know, one of them was wearing a sports jacket. Think about it. There's Oswald walking in. He's got bruises on his face. His elbow, his shirt at his elbow is ripped.
It's crunched up.
Exactly. And you know that was
hair all fucked up. Yeah.
Yeah. In the lineup from the 23rd, when he's basically taken out the jail elevator and walking towards the lineup room. Well, there's a video of that on YouTube, and you just he's complaining about it, and even in the end he said like and that's how I'm going to get kicked out, and you can hear the Dallas detective going, that's right, just like that, and witness statements as well from someone like Senkel, Billy Senkel, for instance, as well, and just writes about it, that he just makes a big song and dance about it. And of course, at that time, he's only wearing a T-shirt, and that's a dirty T-shirt because he's worn that, since the morning of the 22nd as such, and the first lineup actually with Helen Markham, which happens around half 4, 25 minutes to 5 actually, is nothing but a drama, because she had to be sedated before she actually could do that particular lineup as such. She described the killer in many different ways. She covered her face during the actual event, so her memory, she fainted shortly after at the scene of the crime, left her shoes on top of the car. There's 5 other eyewitnesses that never saw her there. Then, of course, she needed to be sedated just before the lineup. Now, Wesley Lieber of the Warren Commission, he stated in a galley proof of Chapter 4, which is called The Assassin of the Warren Report. He goes, some questions might be raised when the public discovers there were only one person who saw Oswald kill him. All the rest saw subsequent events. Mrs. Markham is nicely buried there. And Joseph Ball referred to her as an utter screwball in a conversation with Mark Lane in December of 64. Markham's son was paroled in the summer of 63 after being in prison in 62 for a 5-year term for burglary. So, Dallas police are leveraged on it, definitely. And this goes on and on and on. And I'll tell you what, the best one is, she denied 6 times in her warrant commission for recognizing Lee Oswald. And only with the guidance from Joseph Ball, did she point out Oswald. Now, this is just, the whole thing is just a joke.
Yeah.
So, if that isn't a stitch up, then I don't know what is. And Greg Lowry, he's one of the other top researchers on the whole Tippit case. He said that, this is from John McBride's book, is that the Dallas police cheered when she identified Oswald.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, like, my God, that's just...
They might as well just whisper in her ear, pick number 3.
Yeah, well, that's what it came down to. Yeah, pretty much. So from that, then he gets a second interrogation. He's interrogated again. And this is when Marion Baker sits next to her, and where they basically say, like, did you kill the president? Did you kill the president? Which Oswald, that's absurd. And he basically replied, like, I want a lawyer. I want a lawyer. And then, of course, Roger Craig walks in, as I already mentioned, as such. And, and then it just goes on with the lineups. We've got Ted Galloway, Cecil McWaters, the bus driver, Sam Ginyard. Galloway and Ginyard are contradicting themselves during a Warren Commission testimony. They say, well, what side of the road did the killer walk? And they actually are contradicting themselves by saying the opposite side. One of them said they walked on the west side, and the other one said they're on the east side. That's Cecil McWaters as well, the bus driver. Again, did not want to pick him out of the lineup as such. The bus ride didn't happen anyway. I mean, I think we've already proved that Ed LaDue has done stellar work on that and pointing out as such that it was not Oswald who was on that bus as such. Okay, Hassan Yusuf basically pointed out about Ginyard and Galloway contradicting themselves about this opposite side of the street and such. And Ginyard also mentioned the second person involved with the ticket shooting. And the biggest hammer is, of course, Jim Lavelle so far states he took Galloway's and Ginyard's statement to before the lineup, which is also reconfirmed during the Warren Commission testimony. And the two men's handwritten statements are taken, and the number 2 ID is added on in the typed statement after. So you look at the handwritten reports, and there's no mention of the number 2 ID. And that's then added on afterwards in the typed report as such. Now, I wouldn't say that's fishy, but I think it's quite unorthodox to do it as such. And then shortly after that, Oswald gets arraigned for the murder of Tippett, and that's at 7:10 in the evening. So just over 5 hours after Oswald's been arrested, he's been arraigned for the murder of Tippett.
Right.
When you look at the people that are present during a so-called arraignment, and it isn't an arraignment because an arraignment is a formal summoning of a prisoner in a court of law to answer an indictment, right?
Yeah.
But there's none of that because it's just being done in Fritz's little office. And Fritz's office.
Was it Justice of the Peace or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, he was there. Yeah, Justice of the Peace, David Johnston was there. Well, Fritz was there. Chief Curry was there. But when you ask them what actually happened there, they all have amnesia. They don't know what Oswald said. Sims doesn't know. Boyd doesn't know. Johnston barely knows anything as well. So there's incredibly little to go by. And this is when you get the top 2 videos where Oswald is escorted out and he says, they've been giving me a hearing without legal representation. Did you kill the president? I didn't kill anyone. No, sir. Blah, blah, blah. And that's when he basically gets dragged along, and he does for the 3rd lineup for the Davis sisters.
Yeah, and you can tell he's pissed off at that point.
Yeah. Oh god,
they're
yeah.
shuffling through the hallway.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they and also, who I don't know whose idea it was, but you will never experience anything like that ever again with the press.
Oh my god.
Less than 15 feet away from where the actual interrogations are being.
I'm surprised Ruby didn't shoot him that day.
Yeah, because he had plenty of opportunity to do so.
Well, yeah.
And so then you get the Davis sisters lineup, and then you get that he comes back and he's escorted by Hank Moore, for instance, and where he exclaims that he's a patsy. And again, just like, I'd like to have some legal representation. These police officers have not allowed me to have any. I don't know. And again, I don't know what this is all about. Did you kill the president? No, sir, I didn't. People keep asking me that. And, then you get that, I work in that building. Were you in the building at the time? Well, naturally, if I work in that building. David Van Pien has been for years making an issue about this. But when you look at the context of the larger picture, of actually what he actually says from the beginning to the end, then you just understand that it is a very simple, clear-cut answer to like, well, I work in that building. Yeah, of course. Well, were you in the building at the time? Yeah, well, of course I work. I'm in that building when it happened. Of course I did. And then you get the arrival of Henry Wade, and Wade isn't someone who frequented the Dallas Police Department often. He wasn't there a lot. But what's really fun to him is a guy called Jim.
Press, yeah.
That. But he walks into the Fritz office and he sees Jim Allen there, and Jim Allen was a former assistant PA. He was a buddy of Will Fritz, and he had a hardcore attitude against criminals and was renowned for his death penalty properties. He oversaw at least 20 of them. And this guy was a private citizen at that time. But because he was a buddy of Will Fritz, he was there. So when Wade does his press conference after the Oswald press conference, so that's just before 1 o'clock on the 23rd, you've got Jim Allen standing right next to Vincent Rain and Wade himself and David Johnston. They all stand together really close. And this is a private citizen at that time. It absolutely no legal right to actually be there, but because he was a body. And then, of course, Bill Fraser is brought in, and Fraser gets the harsh treatment. And this is another thing. Isn't it funny that Fraser is driving Oswald, and he gets the full package when it comes to interrogation, because what a lot of people don't know is that Fraser gets picked up and brought to Irving, then he gets picked up, dropped off at Dallas Police, then he goes through all the questioning, the fake statement, and so forth. Then they drive him back, and just before he's back at his house, they pull him back into
Right.
the city again, and they give him that polygraph. He doesn't get back until midnight.
Because Oswald denied the curtain rod story,
Yeah.
which I think was made up by Bill Fraser anyway.
Yeah. I have, yeah, I tend to go along with that, yeah. And then, of course, around the same time, he's fingerprinted and his paraffin cast taken. And you know what? I've got a truckload of pictures of that. And it's like a dog and pony show when they are outside. And this is really weird, Mike, about these pictures that I have. I looked at the pictures and I looked at the available fingerprint casts that are available. And I'll tell you what, the fingerprint card that they're showing, and I don't know whether this is nefarious or, whether you think this is conspiracy or whatever. I can't think that far ahead. But the particular card they are holding up, I cannot find reproduced anywhere. You know what? And I got it from Malcolm's archives and Mary Farrell. They've got copies, and at the University of North Texas and at NARA, and not one of these fingerprint cards is an exact copy of that particular card they're holding up. The reason why I know this is that I managed to enlarge a couple of pictures where they hold up this card. And now, what people don't know is that it's a 5x2 squares on a sheet of paper. So every finger is basically printed within those squares. Now, on the top row, the second on the left, which is of course is the index finger, that print is basically above the line of that particular square. And that's why I know that, okay, so for me as a reference point to compare that to other fingerprint cards to see whether that's also a fingerprint card. Now, the only thing is that there are two fingerprint cards he's holding, but he only shows one. But he's got there's either it's folded or there's another fingerprint card behind it. But the particular fingerprint card that's being shown to the press, I have not found that particular copy anywhere, nowhere, and about 4 or 5 different archives as such. Then of course you get to the nitrate tests. Of course they're all rubbish, and this is the funny part as well, is that they also say, well, would it have made any difference? And he goes no, it wouldn't have made any difference because the release of the gun, the way the rifle works, he wouldn't have gotten any traces on his cheek in the first place anyway. So the whole thing is just a bit of a joke. And like Greg Parker said, it's bluff. And yeah, that's what it looks like. And then you get Bill Alexander. Now, Bill Alexander was the assistant DA for under Henry Wade. There's another fanatical guy, just like Jim Allen, also did a lot of death penalty cases. But these are extreme people. He had an absolute hate for people from the East Coast or Washington and such. And he was true Texan, serious guy, and not to be messed with. Carried a gun as well at all times. And he wants to charge Oswald for killing JFK as part of an international communist conspiracy. He wants to put that in the charge sheet. And that's him and Jim Allen who are responsible for that. And they get actually told off from the higher up. And I think it's David Johnston who calls them up and say, and Henry Wade, you go knock that crap off, forget about it, get rid of that conspiracy and communist stuff, get rid of that. And that is actually starting in Washington and basically trickles down towards Dallas, where they basically thought not to include that. And then, of course, the best lineup of all is the Howard Brennan lineup. Now, Brennan is the pipe fitter. The pipe fitter who sits directly across from the entrance of the Texas City Department, and who actually runs across and basically says that he saw somebody shooting from the sixth floor. Now, in the Warren Commission, it says that he saw, he recognized Oswald in the line, but from the paperwork on Forrest Sorrell that I got, it's evidently clear that Sorrell says he would not recognize him, could not recognize him, and would not pick him out of the line. Later on, he defends it and says, like, well, you know what, my name comes out in the open, and, you know, I'm the guy who picked him out of the lineup, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, trying to weasel himself out of it, but the bottom line is that he could not pick him out. Now, Dallas Police does their best to make it look like Brennan didn't attend the actual lineup. Wolf Fritz also oohs and ahs his way through his Warren Commission testimony. If you read Fritz's Warren Commission testimony, he oohs and ahs a couple of times, and because he just hadn't prepared himself to lie properly on specific moments and such.
Let me ask you a question real quick. Did Amos Ewens ever view a lineup or no?
No, didn't. Didn't.
Okay.
But so, and then Oswald gets invited, interrogated by a guy from the FBI called Manning Clemens, and Clemens basically asks him questions about biographical data, physical descriptions, and background, and so forth. That lasts about 45 minutes. And then after that, and this is also another weird one, an hour later, on 11 o'clock, he gets interrogated by a guy called, a young detective called John Dempsey. Now, why would a young detective be left alone with Oswald? Late in the evening, you know, Fritz has done his bit, Floyd and Sims were there, M.G. Hall was there, Marlon G. Hall, and all the others, they were all there. They were all part of this crew. They are the ones who wear those hats inside. And then all of a sudden, they let this young detective called Dempsey to let him in. And the reason why is because he spoke Russian. That's why they left him alone with him, because they wanted to find out something. Overall, that interrogation doesn't take very long. They must have been trying out something and bluffing, but of course, nothing came out of that. Now, then the press says, like, well, we want to see Oswald. And there's video of that while Wade and Fritz and Curry and Drain, they all stand in front of the office and they're being asked, oh, can we see him, blah, blah, blah. And that's, of course, when you get that whole charade with the press conference and such just after midnight. Then after the press conference, Oswald's taken up, and this is where probably the biggest lie is being perpetrated. Oswald is locked up in jail. He's booked. Now here's the thing. Oswald, or all the movements of Oswald have been recorded in documents. If you go on the Dallas Police JFK document site, you can find all the documentation about the jailers and people that escorted him and all their reports. You can read it, it's all there. So Oswald's phone calls have been recorded as well, in the sense that, you know, at such and such a time, he wanted to call New York, he asked me for pencil and paper to write it down, blah, blah, blah. So all that is recorded. And the same goes for Oswald being booked into jail. But what they say and claim is that Oswald was at that time before, no, sorry, I'm missing one thing. Before he goes back into jail, he has his fingerprints taken again and his mugshot. Because they didn't take a mugshot of him wearing a shirt, brown shirt. He only has mugshots in his white t-shirt. What happens is that once Oswald leaves the press conference, the FBI takes his possessions, and one of them is the evidence. And one of the things is that they want to take his shirt as evidence, which is basically flown by Vince Drain, straight to Washington in some jet. They fly to Washington real quick. So then Oswald is booked into jail, which is around 12:23, and they claim that they take him out and arraign him for the murder of the president as such. Now, there is no evidence that Oswald was booked out, nor was there actually real evidence that shows that Oswald was arraigned. Now, the paperwork, of course, is made up afterwards, but there's a great document by Jim Hosty who clearly says, like, well, he was already arraigned for the Tippit murder, so there was no real need to arraign him for the murder of the president as such. The funny thing is also, this is all supposed to happen while just
Well, I think they were stalling too, Bart. You know,
oh yeah, of course.
they figured they had him locked up for the Tippit murder, and in the meantime, the FBI is quietly taking over everything else. So I think they're at that time they're probably stalling as far as wanted to really pin the shooting of Kennedy on him until they got the okay from the FBI to say to go ahead and do it.
DPD weren't very happy with the fact that they took the evidence away in such a short moment after, on the same day, or practically the earliest morning after, that they took the rifle. I mean, the whole palm print matter is quite a joke. Carl Day. There's a great document that I posted on the Reopen Kennedy Case Forum about Carl Day during the ARRB. That Carl Day would not make a sworn statement as to that the fingerprint was the palm print was underneath the rifle and so forth. There are quite a few holes in Carl Day's story about the actual palm print underneath the rifle and such. So the problem is that I sincerely doubt that Oswald was actually arraigned for the actual murder, because I'll give you a great reason for that. On Sunday morning, when Oswald is being interrogated for the very last time, he says during his interrogation, am I being filed on or not? So basically, at that point, he says, like, I'm going to be accused of killing the president. So had he been arraigned, he would have known that already as such, and say, yes, I'm aware that I've been arraigned for the murder of the president as such. And whereas he's questioning that a full 24 hours later, while he's being interrogated for the 7th time as such. That by itself really is quite a giveaway. The thing is also, there's another thing, not many newspapers are actually reporting on that particular arraignment. I think Timothy Schweik, he wrote something, I think it was in the 3rd or 4th decade magazine, he wrote an article about this. And there were only 4 newspapers who wrote about this. And out of those 4 newspapers, like the New York Times was supposed to do it, but there was no physical copy that made mention of it. It is only visible on a microfiche copy as such. There's no hard copy of it. And some of the other newspapers were very brief in their mentioning as such. So had Oswald really been arraigned as such, all the newspapers would have set this in big headlines and say Oswald being arraigned and so forth. Now the next morning, of course, Oswald's being interrogated again. I've already spoken about the apt matter. And then Joe Molina arrives at the DPD as well. Now Molina is another guy who stood on the top step of the Texas School Body, and he basically is, first of all, they wake him up at 2 a.m. You've got Pat Ganaway, Jack Revel, 2 heavyweights from the Criminal Intelligence Division, and you've got Bill Alexander there as well, and they toss his house, and I mean toss his house. He tells him, his wife and his kids to go sit in the room, wake up the kids, and they toss the house. And they don't find anything. They only find like some letter that say mia comadre, which doesn't mean my comrade, but which they think it does. And they say you come to the police office, police station tomorrow. So at 10 o'clock he's there, and he has his statement taken by Central, police Central, and he also, while he's being interrogated, his name is leaking out through Chief Curry on the airwaves. Curry is a blabbermouth; he can't keep his mouth shut, and basically starts talking and mentions his name, and also that he was a subversive character as such, and he was anything but. He was part of what was called the GI Forum, and the GI Forum was purely for getting better rights for Hispanic soldiers, ex-soldiers that fought during the Second World War. And that's what it was about, nothing else. But the problem was that the Communist Party tried to infiltrate GI Forum. Now Molina didn't want to have anything to do with any communism whatsoever. And the funny thing is that he ran the GI Forum for a year and a bit, but at the same time he'd already dropped his position and didn't pay his membership fee as well in '62, more than a year before the assassination. But you know what? If you are on a subversive list, then that's that. You are scarred for life. So Molina is treated as such. Curry starts talking about him. The press publishes his name, and that has got devastating consequences for Molina because he's basically being let go from the company because there are phone calls coming in saying, I'm not ordering school books from a company that harbors communists and so forth. Those people aren't really the brightest that make those phone calls, but they have plenty of clout and leverage basically on the company itself. So at first, Molina can't put his signature on any stationery. A stationery is being taken away. The secretaries have to do all the signing and such. And by Christmas, he's being let go. He gets 3 months pay, 3 months half pay, gets the bonus. And just after Christmas, he's gone. And they basically put that under the euphemism like, we're going to automate the excuse me, the process of invoicing and so forth. Now, his partner over there, the guy he worked with, is Otis Williams, and Otis Williams was older. So if someone should have been phased out because of automation and such, it would have been Otis Williams. Now, Molina, of course, again, if you think about it, the people that were standing closest to Prayer Man, they got a right beasting as such. And Molina is being harassed for a year or two afterwards. It just.
Now, is Molina the guy we think of when we see the photos, like the Alchins or the Darnell? What is he the guy in the short sleeve shirt, hands up?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's next to Shelley. Shelley's the guy in the suit, in the jacket, the suit. And Molina holds his hands up, and it's Otis Williams as well, the short guy in front of him, also wearing a white shirt, and also shielding his eyes from the sun.
Gotcha.
So, and then and Molina's there till 5 o'clock. So he's there for like 7 hours. They keep him dangling. They don't give a toss about him. And then, of course, you got Marina and Marguerite coming in, and Robert Oswald. It takes Robert Oswald an hour or two longer before he finally gets his hall pass and to go to get to see Lee, his brother, as such. And they talk as well, and he said, "Don't believe all the evidence that they are putting forward," and so forth. Then you got another lineup, and this is probably the funniest part of all the lineup, and that's William Whaley and William Scoggins. They're both cab drivers. Now, Whaley was supposedly the cab driver who took Oswald to Beckley, or close to it, and Scoggins was one of the so-called witnesses. And Whaley's information that he gives for his so-called statement is practically non-existent. They basically ask him to sign a blank piece of paper and say, like, we'll fill in the rest for you. That's what it comes down to. And his Warren Commission isn't much better than that as well. Scoggins doesn't come off very good either. I'll tell you what, when I wasn't very familiar with the lineup, I thought I mean I knew all the names of all the people, but you know, then you start reading in it, and there's just so much wrong. There's so much contradiction in there. I mean, Scoggins' affidavit, he describes the assailant going west before the murder, and that would exclude Oswald being the killer, because it contradicts the timeline of the Warren Commission, because Helen Markham said the assailant was traveling east, you know, and the funny thing is that no one actually jumps in on that. That's the most insane part. It's no different than the second floor lunchroom encounter, because if you look at Baker's first affidavit, he talks about the third and the fourth floor, and you know, and this is part of the evidence, and yet no one jumps in on that and go, well, why is that the third and the fourth floor, and why it becomes the second floor and fourth floor, you know? It's really strange. It's just, but you know, for some reason they just don't jump on top of that. Then Oswald basically makes a phone call at 4 o'clock, and he talks to Ruth Payne. He's trying to get hold of Marina, and Marina, of course, at that point is gone because she's pretty much, well, in quotation marks, hijacked by some journalists, and that's before the Secret Service gets hold of her, and they basically put her away. Then H. Lewis Nichols, of course, I told you about that. He's already visiting the jail as well. And, you know, Oswald at that time is busy trying to get hold of John out. So he says, like, I don't want to see him anymore. And then he says, like, if I can't get out, then I'll have somebody of the ACLU. And that is the funny part, is that the ACLU was already there at 11 o'clock the evening before that. But of course, he has absolutely no knowledge of that, because he never heard they were there. Then there's a movie which is about 6:30 in the evening that Oswald demands hygienic rights because he hasn't had a shower and so forth. And there was a video clip as well of Oswald coming out of the door where the jail elevator is, and he's about to go down the corridor towards Green 317. And there's a segment that Greg Parker found. It was in a documentary called The Lost JFK Tape. And it shows that you see Marion Baker is in the corridor, and he sees Oswald coming out. And the first thing he does is averting his eyes. He can't look him in the eyes. And then also stepping away. He's like diving away behind other police detectives. I thought it was quite a telling so-called confrontation between the two.
Yeah.
And then after that, you get the, that interrogation, the sixth one of that day, the sixth one of in total, the third one of that day, is when the backyard photos all of a sudden come up. Now, I didn't go deep into the backyard photos. There's plenty wrong with it, but I just kept it to his denials and what the others wrote about it while being confronted and stuff.
Right. I mean, there's plenty to argue about the backyard photos.
My God, you and I could do another program on it for 4 hours just talking about the backyard photos.
Yeah.
So I thought, no, you know what? I'm not going to open that can of worms, and I'll just stay there. And then it just Oswald makes another phone call in the evening at 8 o'clock, and that lasts a half an hour. And the problem is that I can't figure out which one it is to whom that call is. That's a big secret. And
so we don't know who he talked to for a half an hour.
Yeah, we don't know.
Wow.
It's possible he maybe talked to Robert or Marina, but I don't know. We don't know. And then you get the so-called rally call. Now, I've made a blog post about this, and because this got started in the 70s in a book um, with A.J. Weberman. I can't think of the title right now, but that came out, and that's where the so-called slip by that shows that there was a call made from Oswald to Raleigh, North Carolina, to a person called John Hurd. And Grover Proctor has done extensive research about this. And
right, and this of course ties into that note, dear Mr. Hurt or Mr. Hunt.
Basically, it says like the rough story is that you've got individuals who were basically connecting these calls, Louis Swinney, Alveda Trayon, and even apparently Trayon's daughter Sharon Kovacs was there as well when it allegedly happened. Now, so the only thing they've got as proof is that slip. And when you got, then I was at Malcolm, and the thing was, in my first version, my first volume, I was going to include this work by Grover Proctor. And then when I was at Malcolm, and then I fished out all these documents, and these are HFCA documents, and where they interviewed these ladies as such. And it's surprising, and I'm understating this, but people like Grover Proctor and Weberman and so forth actually put this story forward because it's a total fugazi. Their statements are contradicting. All three people are contradicting each other. And I mean not a little bit, but completely contradicting each other. Who wrote the slip? Who did this? Who took the phone? Who connected it? And then they first of all trying to implicate Lavelle and somebody else, and then they backtrack that. There isn't one iota of evidence that actually sticks where you can just go, you know what? This is actually quite convincing. And you know what's even worse? You see, every phone conversation that Oswald has been noted. The telephone numbers, and on top of that, every telephone conversation has got a document, a statement from the jailer that says, at that time, I brought him the phone, I took him to the phone, I sat far away enough to give him privacy so he could make the phone call so I couldn't listen and blah, blah, blah. But from that particular phone call, there is zero evidence. Nothing besides that stupid slip. And then when they get hold of her, who's got a history of military intelligence and was in the Far East in the early 50s, and basically denies everything as such. I don't know why this is brought up, this whole slip thing. I think people just want to believe. You get that whole X-Files factor, I want to believe, and that's what happens with this whole thing. Right now, I'm not doing it full justice by talking about it, but if you read it in the paper or the blog post, all you have to do is type in Valley Call on my website in the search box, and that particular thing will come up. And then you get to the 24th, and you've got the last interrogation by the DPD and the Secret Service. The Secret Service puts a fairy tale forward that Oswald was loosening up, but Oswald said, "I'm not going to discuss anything about these murders until I've got legal representation." I mean, he was pretty clued up when it came to that. He said, "I'm not talking about any of these things that could incriminate him until he had a lawyer present." Everything else he would talk about, his work or Russia as such, he would talk about it. He would have no qualms whatsoever. And then, of course, Curry is a bit impatient, starts hammering on the door, said, "Look, let's go." And there's, by the way, before that happens.
Yeah, well, they wanted that easy confession, but they never got it.
And you know what? The thing is also, it gets destroyed partially because on Sunday morning, U.S. Postal Inspector Harry Dean Holmes, and he is not part of the network as such. He hasn't been around on Saturday and Sunday. Of course, he did his so-called research and find out about the post office box that Oswald had rented as such. apparently a rifle had come to it. Well, no one can remember handing him that rifle as such. But what Holmes wrote down in his report and his warrant put the so-called encounter between Oswald and Baker on the first floor and not on the second floor as such. He said specific elements, 2 sets of doors. He starts talking about coming down the stairs and so forth. Why did he go outside? Because of the commotion and so forth. So there are bits in the testimony and the statement that give the game away from Holmes. And Holmes is another clown who apparently works from memory as such. You know, what's that book called? That he's in. Oh, God. The Larry. Oh, God.
Someone would have talked.
Yes, that's it. He's in that as well. And he bigs himself up as well. And you know what? Here's the thing. Will Fritz would never record or have a stenographer. And Holmes worked the same way. Will Fritz would have somebody sitting behind the defendant. And basically, if they'd have to go to court, he would say these things, and the guy who sits behind would confirm it. Just think about it, how you can get nailed for murder if 2 people just decide that you're the guilty person. I mean, that's how I can get a 98% conviction rate, you know, if you just think about it, when nothing has been put to paper.
Yeah. They could just say, well, he admitted to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, of course, Oswald's taken out and he gets snuffed. There's a video where it looks like Oswald looks Ruby in the eye before he gets killed. It's quite possible. I put that video up as well, and you know, it does look like he recognizes Ruby, but what that means, what that further means, I don't know. Absolutely don't. Lavelle as well. Lavelle said in an interview as well, I saw him in the corner of my eye, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you look at the front page picture of the Dallas Morning News, then
neither one of them are looking at him. Yeah.
They're completely unaware. It happened so quick, you know, because I'll tell you what, if you look at the reporters as well, all of them, they were all like clueless about what was about to happen as such. Now, before I call it, it's one thing. There's a document from February the 3rd, 1964, and there are phone numbers written on it. A small piece of paper bearing the following phone numbers were written on it, and which is quite significant because one of them was unlisted and not working for about 7 years. So what's the point? You know,
yeah.
And to having that number, unless it is a code, you know, unless he was wrong, but or unless it was a code. You know, I've spoken to other people about this, but their guesses are as good as mine. So you know, and you know, that's pretty much it. I mean, if you want to read the short version is 5 pages long, which is a bullet point version. The long version is around 335 pages. The reason why that is because I included a lot of pictures, videos, and documents there and then. So while you scroll through it, you get to read all the documentation and such. And of course, it's plenty of interactive links to click on as well. You can find these on the front page of my website, prayer-man.com. And just scroll down, and just underneath that video are links to the PDFs and such. The big one, of course, needs a little bit of time to load, but it's all there. That's it.
Awesome. Hey, one more thing before I let you go. Talk to me a little bit about the whole. Well, I saw on your website, and I didn't get a chance to talk to Ed about it. Ed Ledoux. Apparently, he had gotten in touch with Marina Oswald about Prayer Man and pretty much asked her.
What happened was that?
Yeah.
Happened was that Ed called. Ed and I had a chat, and so she would contact Marina, and I was like, I'm not sure. And then we threw it in a group, and Stan, Dane, and Greg, and others, we all went, yeah, why not? Let's go for it. And then Stan Dane went, why don't I send you some pictures, printouts on photographic paper of the best Darnell and Deacon show. Yeah. So, yeah, let's do that. So what happened was that Ed rang and left a message, and by complete surprise, she rang back 25 minutes after he left the message. And this is that basically resulted in Ed not recording the call. And what came out of that particular conversation was she said, "It's Lee." Oh, sorry. We sent the pictures before we called. That's what happened. That's correct. So we sent the printouts. They were pretty big. They were like A4 size, I think, or even bigger. And once we sent the pictures, Ed called up, left a message, then she called back, and she volunteered it. The thing was, he didn't ask her and go, "So what do you think?" And he just went, "So did you get the parcel?" Blah blah. "Oh yeah, okay." "And how's everything?" And she just went, "It's Lee." And so that, of course, knocked him back and knocked us all back. And the second time, he called her and basically said, like, "Look, we didn't record it, but we want to, we didn't get a chance to record it, but they're recording it now. But can we give you a blessing with regards this statement that you made?" And she went, "Of course you can." So that was then recorded. We got that on tape. And the other thing is that it was really simple because we also sent her Stan Dane's book. And Stan Dane's book was, she said, "Have you read it?" She said, "No." She said, "Like, it's too complicated." She says, "In the end, it's only about two people, Billy Lovelady or Lee Oswald. And since Billy Lovelady left the steps, you can see it. It's Lee Oswald." And she made it so simple because, a lot of conspiracy theories make it just so convoluted and complicated or such. And
Yeah.
she just basically just cut the weed from the chaff and just like, no, it's just between him and the other guy, Billy, and that was that. And we just went, yeah, that's what it comes down to. So we knew this. We had this phone call in our bag for quite a while, about 6 months, 7 months. And we said, we'll wait for the right time because I said, like, if we release this, these nutcases like Brian Doyle and all that, they're just basically coming after us and trying to do their best at denying this whole thing. And I said, you know what? I will wait for the moment's right. And when I found that document, I said, shall we release the statement by Marina a week after the document? And we went like, yeah, good idea. So that's what we did. So I made that post.
Yeah, well, that's a giant stamp of approval because, I mean, she is the person who would have known Lee, his mannerisms, the way he stands, what he looks like, the best.
I've got another bombshell, but I can't tell you yet.
We'll save that for another show.
Yeah, we've got something that changes things as well to an extent. And I can tell you that it's footage, and I will tell you more about it when my next papers come out. Now, papers 3 and 4, Anatomy of the Texas School Book Depository and Anatomy of Prayer Man. I'm working on them as we speak. I've made quite a bit of progress on both papers, and I hope to release them, and I'm going to release them together. I hope by summer next year. I don't know when, but when exactly, I'll probably know this, I don't know, once after the Canterbury seminar in April. I've got a better idea then. But I've got a feeling that I'm going to be able to release them before next year's anniversary. And I'm getting to a point where I'm basically then, from a research point of view, pretty much finished. And then it's time to go to Dallas and also some of the archives and plow through a few more bits that can be added on. So. But then in that particular Prayer Man paper, I'll divulge some pretty hot information about what we have, and which will work in conjunction with Marina's statement, Wolf Fritz's notes, and James Holstey's handwritten notes as well. So on top of that, so it'll be good and worthwhile the wait as well. But,
I'll be waiting with bated breath for that. But I'm going to get you on here before all that happens. We'll reconnect here in a couple months and just pop in and have a little chat maybe about what DPUK's got going on.
We've got a lot going on. We've got Alan Dale in 2 weeks' time, and Alan Dale is a great guy who's very close to John Newman and many others, Jim Lazar, Bill Simpich, just to name a few. When it comes to name calling, but so he's a good source of information. So I'm going to talk to him in a couple of weeks' time. Then I'm going to talk to Michael Mercadis, I hope I pronounced that right, who is Rose Sharami's son. So we'll be talking to him in January. And our program for April's Canterbury seminar, I managed to get it sorted within a week. We've got John Newman talking to us. We've got Dan Hardway talking to us. There'll be a Q&A between me and them. And we've got a few others. And it should be really good. So probably got somebody from March as well. So we need to get somebody for that. And so we've got a new pub that we're going to. We used to go to a place called the Flying Horse, but due to management change, it wasn't as easy going as it was before. Also, expense-wise, and we found a new place called the Cheshire Cheese, which is in more central, southeast central London, and it's a very nice place. We've got our own room in there with a screen and internet connection, so we can Skype, we can talk to anyone we want, and the room is out when we're there, and eating burgers and drinking pints of beer, so this isn't a bad recipe, so it's great. The meetings are great fun. We've got about between 12 and 16 people on average, and at Canterbury we've got 30 to 40 people coming down. So and actually, I've got to tell you, it's amazing how cheap we are compared to our American compatriots as such. Because what's the luncheon? The JFK luncheon? $70, and the Kappa thing. The Kappa, how much is the Kappa?
Try 140.
Yeah, 140. Right now, we are charging, I think, £40 for a 2-day seminar. So, which is roughly about between $50 and $60 for a 2-day. And we've got university, like we've got all the facilities known to mankind. So we've got a hot internet connection. And,
right.
And we've got a massive projector, and it's an auditorium, so it's absolutely wicked. You can just, we've got speakers everywhere. We've got a phone. We can phone anyone worldwide, no problem. No hooey about the phone bill whatsoever. We can just put them on the phone for an hour, and pops your own calls. It's brilliant. So the Canterbury seminars is absolutely sick. So that's it.
All right, yeah, well, we'll catch up before then. Thank you, Bart. Like I said, everybody head to prayer-man.com for more on this. If you want to download the gigantic 335-pager to get the documents, the pictures, and follow along and read everything else that Bart's been working on, prayer-man.com. And folks, if you're in England or Great Britain or whatever you want to call it, and you'd like to hang out with some like-minded people and discuss the case, consider joining Dealey Plaza UK. I wish I lived over there because we'd have a great time and drink.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing like that where I live. I mean, I think I might be the only one within 60 square miles that gives a shit about the assassination, but I'd be by my lonesome just getting drunk.
Well, we're lucky that, because I reside in London, so, and the majority of the member base is within the M25, which is the motorway that goes around London and such. As the motorway, every motorist actually hates because it's always, stuck in traffic. Most members live within that circle.
Yeah, and I see the stats of people that listen, and the United Kingdom, there is a lot of listeners to this show. So if you think you wish you'd ever make it to the United States to a conference, the next best thing, or even probably a better thing, is to join Daily Plaza UK with some other like-minded individuals. And
18 pounds a year. So
you can afford it.
And you get 2 copies of our magazine, the Daily Plaza Echo, which is a full-color magazine, full-color cover, and inside as well, on glossy paper. It's a really nicely printed magazine. You get 2 issues a year. So, that's where most of the money actually goes into, the printing and shipping, postage and packing.
Yeah, and the first round is always on Bart, right?
Yeah, no worries.
There you go, folks. Bart, thank you again for coming on the show and doing this. You hang on the line for me.
Yeah.
Folks, that's it for episode 157, The Interrogations with my friend Bart Kamp. For more, head to Twitter at The Lone Gunman 7. Follow me if you want to stay on top of things. That's where to do it. Or on Facebook page, The Lone Gunman Podcast. Or just Google The Lone Gunman Podcast, and you can find my shows wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, leave a review. It'd be greatly appreciated. See you folks in Dallas in a few weeks. And if you want to hook up, like I said, hit me up on Twitter. I'll be in Dallas. I'll be wearing a sweet ass Lone Gunman t-shirt all around Dallas. You can't miss me. It's big and purple on the back with Lee Oswald's big ugly mug on the back and mine on the front. So look for me and hit me up. We'll hang out and do it right. That's it for this one, folks. Beamed up to the satellite, down to your ears, and I just fucked the ending up. So we'll just call it that. And I'll edit all that shit out. And that's it, Bart.